I'd like to thank the Process Art Discovery audience for joining me here today. I'm Lynda Norman. I'm a watercolor artist in British Columbia, and today I'm going to be talking about watercolor on Yupo, which is quite a unique product, and our watercolors will act quite differently from what we've been seeing on paper and canvas. We've worked on paper, we've worked on canvas, and in the past I've worked on Yupo with alcohol ink. That was years ago when I did a lot of alcohol inks. I'm so enamored with watercolors now that I like to explore what they can do. So one of the things that I've worked on in the past is something called Yupo. YUPO. It's a polypropylene plastic that's highly compressed so that it's non-porous. As you know, with watercolor paper, the idea is to use a paper that will absorb the pigment and hold on to things and work with your colors that way. With Yupo, you don't have that option. And I have a couple of small examples here. Basically, what you do is let your water and pigments sit on the surface until they dry. You can move them, manipulate them a tiny bit, but quite a different process than if you're working on paper. You can get Yupo in many different sizes. This is a nice little 5x7 pad that is very handy to have. I love it because it's just handy to be able to do small studies as I want to try things out. You can get it in a larger size. They usually come in a pad, and usually on white. I think there are different colors, perhaps, that you might want to explore, and maybe we'll do that in the future if I can find some black or some other colors that we can work on. And then you can also get them in larger sheets as well. And I think today I'm going to work on the smaller piece so that it's easier to manage because the pigment and the water sit on the surface. It takes a bit of time to dry. It's not like a watercolor wash where you can put a nice light wash on and it absorbs quickly and is dry. So let's see what we can come up with here. It's because it's non-porous, it's not going to be absorbing water. It's not going to buckle, so we don't need to tape it down. You certainly could if you wanted to keep it with a nice border, but that's not necessary either. And you'll see as we go along, because it's non-porous, you could just wipe the color off if you wanted a border to stick it on or glue it onto something else. Otherwise, I like that it's loose and I can pick it up and move it if I want to, if I need to, or spin it around because I'm working on a nice solid surface here. That's going to be quite easy to do. So I have misted my paints. I will do that one more time. The key with Yupo is to keep things more of a thick consistency. If you use a lot of water, it's going to move around and you won't have the control maybe that you want. And that's maybe okay for if you wanted to do a sky, because I'm a landscape artist. This is what I typically focus on, is skies and trees and land formations. So let's start with that. I'm going to dampen my brush, but as I said, I'm not going to add a lot of water. I don't want it running all over the page. And we're going to just dampen the brush, dry it off slightly. I'm going to grab a piece of towel to have in my hand. And because my paints have been awoken with some spray water, I'm going to, you can see where I'm just sort of scruffing the surface a little bit. I want to pick up a fair bit of pigment. And I'm just going to dip it in once. You can see the pigment on the brush. And I'm just going to move it across the page to make a sky. It will go forever because there's no tooth on the surface to hold it. And it is quite lovely. I'm going to carry this color right down to the bottom. I'm going to lay the colors over top where I want to put my land and my trees. You can see here, I'll show you where every little brush mark, every little change in direction will show. You can use that to your advantage. I don't mind having a little bit of these fluffy bits, and as it dries, they will start to form cloud shapes. And you can use your brush to encourage those shapes. If you wanted to have a bank of clouds coming through. Again, you'll notice I haven't touched my palette since that first initial couple of dabs into that Mayan dark blue. And it gives you a bit of an abstract-y kind of feel. And keep the rule of thirds in mind. I'm going to keep maybe a little bit of a shoreline here. And pull some of that color out. Dry my brush off and just pull the color across. Now that I can see, if I sit back, I can see there's a bit of sheen still to the surface, so that paint is still drying. It's going to sit right on the surface until it dries. So you can see, the advantage of not having a lot of water on your surface, because that will take much longer to dry. Because I don't have a lot of water on the surface, I can go in with another color fairly soon. I don't have to wait for it all to dry. If I wanted to put other color on top, I would want to wait without touching the sky any further, because any more brush marks, any more touching the surface will change that look. And I kind of like that, that organic kind of fluffiness there. Skies don't always have to be exactly with perfect clouds going across. So this is going to be my version of a sky. It almost reminds me of a Starry Night kind of painting, but we'll carry on with the landscape theme. And let's go with our Mayan dark green. And again, just a dab. This is the hockey brush, by the way. For those of you who don't know, it's one of my go-to tools. And I'm just going to wet my surface just a little bit more. Dabbing one time into the undersea green, Daniel Smith undersea green. And this is going to give me the undertones for some shadows in some trees that are coming out. If we make this, let's make it a meadow for a change. I very often do landscapes with shorelines and lakes and rivers and things. But let's make this a bit of a meadow, perhaps. And so I will want to have trees and shrubbery coming along. And to balance things out, I will go just on this side as well. Up a little higher for some tree shapes. This may be a little pathway coming in. You can get more detailed if you want. You could even draw on afterwards if you wanted to put some fence lines or some different things in. But I think for today, for these little guys, we'll stick to this. So I've got some nice deep undersea green just for some shadow colors. I'm going to rinse my brush again. I have my trusty spray bottle out, but I don't think we'll be using that on the Yupo today. As I'm sitting, I can sit back. I can see the sky part is pretty much drying. There's some spots that still have a bit of sheen that shows me that it's still a bit moist. Anytime I touch, I'll just show you on the side here, it comes right off. So you can change things up quite easily. You can lighten things. this is a nice opportunity, while it's still a bit damp, to mix right on the surface of your work. Oftentimes, you know, we'll mix in the sidewells if we're looking for colors, but I don't mind using colors straight from the palette. And I'm just dipping into my quinacridone gold, which is a very solid standby for me. This is a pretty large brush for this surface, and because this is a meadow, it is a fall scene because of the colors I've put in, but I think I'm going to, you know, allow it to still have some green grass. And I'm going to go into my secondary palette and just pick up a tiny bit, one dab of sap green. It's a brighter green, and I just want to put a tiny bit of that into my foreground. My brush was a bit wet, but by adding that little bit of green, you can see where the water touched from my brush, touched where I had applied the quinacridone gold and the undersea green. It had caused it to run a little bit. So I'm going to turn that into my, to an advantage of just having some shrubbery in front of those trees. And one more dab into the undersea green. I barely touched that palette. And you can see where that is enough color to create a beautiful bit of texture. And I think because we've got that sort of dappled texture in the sky, I'm going to continue that along on the bottom part a little bit. Give that indication of some grasses. Pardon me. Now we've used three colors. We've got undersea green for the trees. We have Mayan dark blue in the background for some of the for all of the sky actually, and then in the front part we have a little bit of sap green. So that's four colors. Pardon me. Again, sitting back, I can see it's still glossy and wet in this area, and again on these trees. This front part is showing that it is drying a little bit better. I'm going to go in with just another color, and I'm just I want to have something a little bit brighter. Quinacridone rose. It sounds like it might be a nice option. And I'm just going to just highlight a couple of spots with that rose to bring in just a bit of brightness. This would be a good surface to do spatter on as well. You'll notice that things sit on the top because they're not absorbing, and that's ideally what we want spatter to do when we use spatter. So there's a pretty simple landscape. One of the fun things that I like to do is incorporate other tools, and my daughter gave me this set of tools that manicurists use to draw beautiful little designs in the nail polish. And I thought we'd try that today just to see how that does for making some nice branches and tree shapes. And it's working quite well. They have different size balls on the end, so that was a thicker one. If I wanted to make finer branches, I can work those out there as well. I like to stagger the trees a little bit, and when I'm making a trunk of a tree, I often will keep the line sporadic. Don't want to do a straight, solid line all the time, because if there are leaves happening on your tree at all, they're going to break up that appearance of your trunk. And this side will have just a little bit, a couple of indications of some branches and some trees coming up. And if you just want to create some texture and some shadows, you can scuffle with your sharp edge or your hard edge. Another fun thing to do is with the trusty piece of plastic. These come from produce bags, bread bags. Sometimes they have little nubs on the end. I usually scrape those off with an X-Acto or a utility knife, and then sometimes with a sanding block, I will just go like that. Helps to keep that edge smoother, and it also can sometimes help you get a finer edge. Sometimes they're a bit chunky. Now I'm sitting back and looking, and I can see there's still just a bit of glossiness there. And you can scrape in some shapes for some rocks. If you find that that the paint has dried too much, a simple dab with your brush into the water, dry so that you're not adding tons and tons of water, and it's so easy to go back in and rework that surface. Reactivate those paints, so it's almost like, you know, working with your palette as you're reactivating your colors. And so with your finer brush, you can go in and add more moisture, add more water, add more color. Pardon me. Add a bit of some of that beautiful quinacridone rose in the background. And sometimes just touching a little bit with the water allows enough of the paint to come off that it just gives you a bit of lightness and that lovely kind of reflection that we like to see. This painting doesn't have a direct indication of a sun in the background, and so we don't really need to have a directional indication of light. But you can move things around. If you had a sun or a moon in the background, you might want to do some shadows, and that's easy to do just by pulling the color down. But I got a little bit of darker green here that kind of showed up, I think, from that tab that I was using, that plastic tab. So I'm just going to go over that slightly. And as with watercolor on paper, a feather light touch, and you can just pull your colors out. A little bit of a horizon line in the background as that pathway sort of moves off. Light feather touch. And then because we had sort of that textured surface, we'll just go back in and add a bit more of that to finish that off. There you have a quick and easy bit of color creating a little landscape on a piece of Yupo. try it. Try a small piece. Maybe invest in a pad of Yupo, a larger piece or larger sizes, and then you can always cut them down and practice on the smaller pieces. But as you can see, it's dried nice and flat. There is no buckling, and in a few short minutes, you have a lovely little landscape. I'd like to thank the Process Art Discovery audience for joining me here today. If you like what you've seen, subscribe to the channel.